continue to be a resource for you in the future. We'll post the recording on CEDAC's website once it's available. Second, if you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please do so using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will try and answer it during the presentation. We will also have a question and answer session after the presentation. So if you would like to ask a question during that Q&A session, please use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will call on you after the presentation and allow you to unmute. The chat button at the bottom of your screen is not functional, so don't try to communicate to the presenters via the chat. I want to thank Kate Racer and her team at DHCD, as well as my colleagues at CEDAC, who you can see on the screen, for their hard work on this checklist. And with that, I will hand it over to Kate.
Thank you so much, Roger. I'm here on the lonely planet of DHCD. We're on the 4th floor of the salt and stall in our temporary quarters, which are both spare and very, very cluttered. So I apologize for whatever you see in the background there. I thought I'd clean up a little today, but I quickly lost the desire to do that. Again, thank you, Roger, and our other CEDAC buddies who are on the screen, also Rebecca and my own folks, my own colleagues, for everything that everybody has done so far on MWBE and improving how we approach MWBE procurement and results here in Massachusetts. There are so many things that we do, we, the public lenders, CEDAC, DHCD, the other quasis, with all of you, the people on the ground. We do, and after all, together we constitute the delivery system for Massachusetts. Many things I think we do pretty well. Some things we do very well, but almost everything we do, we could do better, or probably everything we do, we could do better. And that's certainly true of MWBE. This is a big priority for the Baker-Polito administration, something that the governor has raised directly with us on numerous occasions. It's a big priority for DHCD and CEDAC, but it's also a big priority for many of you who are joining us on the call. We know that some of you have done an excellent job. Most of you take this very seriously. I'd like to think everyone on this call takes it very seriously. And there really are only a few teams that seem to demonstrate very little interest in this area. And as I've said a few times to people, that's not a good thing. It's not acceptable. But let's go back to the positive. Again, so many of you do an excellent job, but it's clear that we can all do better. CEDAC has given us just a huge lift over the last few months, developing the checklist tool. And that's what Roger and the gang, I think Will Morgan's going to do part of this, and several of the other folks who are pictured are going to do part of this as well. Please, please read part at least of the new QAP, which is posted to our website. It's a draft that will become final on Monday. The public hearing was in December. Some of you were at the public hearing. The new QAP speaks to MWBE in a different and enhanced way. If you don't want to wade through the whole document, and I understand that, trust me, even I don't want to wade through the whole document some days, please read the executive summary. Please go through the MWBE attachment, which is in the first set of attachments, and make use to the best of your ability of what we're able to offer to you. Roger, I'm going to turn it back over to you guys. Thanks again.
Thank you, Kate. I just want to give a little bit of context of how we came about working and with DHCD on this. Like many of your organizations over the last year and a half, we have been doing a lot of thinking about how we can advance racial equity in our work of affordable housing development and preservation. And DHCD and Mass Housing Partnership, and CEDAC have been meeting for several months thinking about ways that we can advance this agenda. CEDAC did some research looking at how developers have responded to questions about their MBE plans in some prior funding rounds. And because the questions and the way they were posed were more general, we found that responses were really all over the map. And which doesn't, as Kay was saying, necessarily reflect the performance, but it did reflect, kind of a wide variation in how seriously developers were taking the idea of trying to increase the usage of minority business enterprises in their development projects. Some of the issues that we saw in that analysis, we set out to address through the design of this new checklist, and Will is going to go through it in detail in a moment. The other thing that we did was we looked at all the QAPs we could get our hands on from around the country, and we ended up looking at 44 qualified allocation plans around the country to see how different states are addressing MBE utilization in their plans. And I'd say that the most shocking conclusion out of that is that 2/3 of the states in their QAPs have absolutely no reference at all to minority business enterprises, which is pretty shocking. So we, obviously, Massachusetts has had it for a long time, but we want to really try improve, the way that we're gathering the information. And as Kate said, we all know we can do better in this effort. It's going to be a multi-year effort. And this checklist is really the first step in trying to have our partners think more intentionally about how they go about planning projects to increase MBE usage. So with that context, I'm going to turn it over to Will Morgan of the CEDAC staff to walk through the new checklist.
Thanks, Roger, and hi, everyone. So as Roger said, I'm going to briefly run you through the checklist. Again, if you have questions as I'm going through this, please write them in the Q&A section or use the raise your hand feature, and we should have plenty of time to answer them after my presentation. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see this. As the header indicates, the checklist is Appendix C in the new draft QAP for 2022-2023. You can also find it on CEDAC's website at cedac.org/housing/resources. We can put that link in the chat for folks. Everyone should have also received it as an attachment in the email invitation for this event. So multiple areas to find this appendix, but if you do need it, please go to CEDAC's website. So the QAP for a long time has required that sponsors demonstrate their commitment to diverse development team assembly and diverse supplier contracting by having sponsors put together a written MBE and WBE plan. This is submitted with your full application as Exhibit 32.2 of the One Stop. This new checklist that we've developed and that we'll go over in a moment doesn't change that requirement in any way. Instead, as with other checklists included in the QAP over the years, this is simply a new method for collecting information that allows DHCD and its agency partners to easily understand how well sponsors are meeting the QAP requirements. I should note that this new checklist also covers information pertaining to HUD's Section 3 requirements, which are applicable to any projects utilizing certain federal resources like home funds or CDBG. For those who would like more information about MBE and WBE definitions, the State Supplier Diversity Office, or Section 3 requirements, we've included the relevant links about halfway down the first page of the document. If you can see my cursor here, the links are here if you would like additional information that will help you as you fill out the checklist. I should say that we're using the term checklist a bit loosely because really the bulk of the document is split into two major sections. One with a set of instructions and the other with a fillable form. But we are still calling it a checklist to try and be consistent with some of the other QAP appendices that you're familiar with, things like the sustainability checklist or the accessibility checklist. As with those, we are calling this the MBE and WBE checklist. So let's start with the first section, which is the instructions section. Here, what we are doing is providing a set of instructions to sponsors as to what we at DHCD and CEDAC feel should be included in a robust and comprehensive written MBE and WBE plan. Again, this written plan will become your Exhibit 32.2, which you'll upload to IntelliGrants as part of your full application. I assume most of you are familiar with this process, having used IntelliGrants and submitted one-stops in the past. I'm not going to go through every single bullet point in the instructions today because the vast majority of them are fairly self-explanatory, but I will highlight a few important ones based on things we've either seen or in some cases things we haven't seen in prior plans during our rental round reviews. So I'm going to start with this first bullet here. First, a high quality plan should be written by the sponsor, not the general contractor. Per the QAP, the sponsor is the one who is responsible for committing to diverse hiring and contracting. So the task of outlining that commitment in a written plan should fall to the sponsor, not the general contractor or another development team member. Also, while the GC can play a significant role in diverse hiring and contracting, construction is definitely not the only area where we would expect to see this activity because there are ample opportunities for the sponsor to utilize MBEs and WBEs within soft cost areas and in operations as well. Next, a good plan should be project specific. This means it is crafted to fit the context of the project. Too often we see plans submitted that are entirely generic in nature, or even worse, reference an old project from a prior application. Moving down to these last two bullet points on the first page, a good plan should include information on the sponsor's prior track record with MBE and WBE contracting, as well as the prior track record of your GC if one has already been engaged. Moving to this second bullet point on the second page, a good plan should include specific percentage goals for MBE and WBE utilization. It is not sufficient to simply say that the sponsor will make best faith efforts. The plan should have quantitative, measurable goals, and this is very important, the plan should not combine the MBE goal with the WBE goal into one merged percentage goal. They are obviously not the same thing, and they should be separated out. The same rule goes for any other diverse hiring or contracting goals the sponsor may have. Be sure that the plan separates them out into their own goals and is specific about those goals. I want to move down to the bullet point that covers section 3 here by my cursor. So for those projects that are subject to section 3, the instructions that we've included here recommend including 3 goals in your written plan. All of these goals are related to total construction work hours. And these are the exact same ones you'll have to report on during construction. So we are trying to be consistent with what you would already need to do if your project is subject to section 3. And as I think as many of you know, the reporting requirements for section 3 were recently updated to focus on work hours, which is what we have here, rather than new jobs created, which is probably what everyone is used to from the past. Next, not only should a high quality written plan outline what proactive steps the general contractor will take to increase MBE and WBE contracting, even if the GC hasn't been selected yet, the plan should also explain how those steps will be memorialized. One approach we've seen in the past is to write those steps or goals into the construction contract itself, but there are likely many other methods sponsors can use to ensure compliance. As I mentioned earlier, a high-quality written plan should absolutely include information pertaining to MBE and WBE contracting in soft cost areas. So this is things like architecture, engineering, environmental, legal, etc. Also, this information should include any efforts by your development team members to do things like joint ventures or subcontracting as a way of further increasing opportunities for MBEs and WBEs. Moving to the second to last bullet point, a good plan should also include information about diverse hiring and contracting in property management and operations. This is an area that is often overlooked, but is absolutely one where there are numerous opportunities for increasing both diverse hiring within property management staffing and for engaging MBEs and WBEs as subcontractor to the property manager. And then with this last bullet point, of course, if there are additional efforts that you are taking related to diverse hiring and contracting that aren't covered in these instructions, you should absolutely include them in your written plan so that we as public agencies can continue to learn best practices in the field. So that brings us to the end of the instructions section. Hopefully this lays out a clear roadmap for sponsors to follow as you put together your written plans. But we are absolutely open to any and all feedback you may have now or in the future. It's the reason we're going through this today in this intro session. And then in the future, as I'll discuss at the end of my presentation, we would like for anyone who has further comments after this intro session to submit them to me at CEDAC. So I'll cover that at the end of my presentation. So let's move to the second section of the form, which is the fillable form. The fillable form is where you will input certain quantitative information from your written MBE and WBE plan. So before I go through the form, just in terms of process, once you've filled out this form, you need to do two things with it. The first is to attach the completed form to the end of your MBE and WBE plan, which again is Exhibit 32.2 of the one-stop, and upload that combined document to IntelliGrants along with the rest of your application materials. Okay, so that was the first thing. The second thing you need to do with the completed form is to email it to Kate Racer and Rebecca Frawley-Wachtel at DHCD. I'm pretty sure that everyone here has their email addresses, but we are going to put them in the chat so that folks can see those. But again, just to summarize, you are going to complete the form, attach it to the end of your written plan, and upload it as Exhibit 32.2 to the one-stop. And then separately, you're going to email the completed form to Kate and Rebecca. So the fillable form is split into 4 categories for your ease of use. Those 4 categories are general information, construction, soft costs, and then, if applicable to your project, Section 3 as well. So the general information section, which you can see here, asks for basic details about the project and the sponsor. I don't think any of this is going to be too hard to fill out. I do want to mention one thing. As many of you already know, nonprofits can qualify as diverse business enterprises depending on the makeup of their board, even though they don't have direct ownership in the way a for-profit would. So if you are a diverse business enterprise, please do indicate it here because we want to know that information. The next category is construction. This is where you will need to put your separate MBE and WBE goals. Please note that the 2 fields in this construction section that ask about construction work hours, these are these 2 lines here, if you can see my cursor. These are consistent with the City of Boston's requirements. So if your project is in Boston, these fields are going to be relevant to you. For many of you, though, these may not be applicable unless you have set goals for construction work hours, which is totally appropriate. But we wrote if applicable because the QAP itself does not require this information. The next section is soft costs, where we ask for the name of your property manager, if you know it at the time of application, and the names of any MBEs and WBEs that you've engaged for soft cost areas. Please also include any MBEs or WBEs that might be joint ventured or subcontracted by your development team members as well, because we want to know that information. And then finally is the section 3 category, which ends the form. Again, this asks for the same information that I referenced earlier related to total construction work hours. And it's the same information that you'll need to include in your reporting if your project is subject to section 3. So that brings us to the end of the entire form. As I mentioned earlier, we really would love any and all feedback from the development community. So as you're going through the process of filling this out, and you have something you want to share or you have questions about it, please email me. My email address is wmorgan@cedac.org. We can put that in the chat as well. But the best way for us to learn kind of what is most useful to the development community in regards to filling out this form is to hear from you directly. And hopefully we'll be able to incorporate some of your comments into future revisions of this checklist. So please do reach out. I also just want to end by mentioning that we are working with our colleagues at MHIC on a training related to MBE and WBE contracting. And we should have more details on that forthcoming in the next several weeks. So please keep your eyes out for that as well. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we will move to the Q&A section. So I haven't been monitoring the Q&A, but Sarah, I think you've been kind of keeping your eyes on it. Is there anything that was in the Q&A that we weren't able to answer while I was going through my presentation?
Thanks, Will. There are a few questions here that I think we should be able to address. Somebody's looking for clarification on how to fill out 32.2 and 32.3, whether those should be organized as responses to bullet points or a narrative to address the bullet points. That may also be a question that we want to hear from our colleagues at DHCD about what you would prefer to see in that narrative section.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's no one set way to complete Exhibit 32.2. In the past, it's been pretty narrative in format, which if that works for you, then we're not suggesting changing anything about that. There's probably information that isn't listed in those bullet point instructions that you might want to talk about. So I certainly don't want to have anyone think that the bullet point instructions cover everything that you might want to reference in Exhibit 32.2. So certainly don't feel constrained by those. But if those are a helpful starting point for you, they do cover the majority of probably what you would want to discuss, and that's totally fine. The only thing that really needs to be kind of formulaic is filling out that form itself, the second part of the checklist. It's set up to be a form where you're simply typing answers after the colon. And so that's really the only one area where you need to kind of follow the landscape of the form, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Will. Let's see. DHCD colleagues, we have a Section 3 question inquiring if Section 3 applies to our project. Are the numerical goals at our discretion, or are there specific targets from HUD?
There are specific targets, general targets from HUD. Section 3 has been sort of revived, or not quite reinvented per se, but restructured a little bit with a lot of emphasis from HUD on that. And we are working to implement that with our programs. It's still a bit of a work in progress, but it is something that's very important. I think, you know, the HUD goals are important, but those are really still de minimis goals. So I think it's important, you know, on a project by project basis to try to achieve something that is meaningful to a project. Not sure if anyone else would like to add anything on that. We hope to have more direction for folks coming up, but it is something that we do have to think about a bit more and work with some of our colleagues in the local home participating jurisdictions as well.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I believe if you click on the Section 3 FAQs document that's linked in the checklist, I believe it should take you to the document where those targeted goals are listed.
Great, thank you, Rebecca and Will. Let's see, we have a little question looking for some clarification about exactly what the exhibit numbering is, 32.2, 32.3. Let's see, I think the old QAP had exhibit 32.1. So there may be just a little confusion generated by straddling two QAPs at once and adding this document from the new QAP to an application that is still coming in under the old. So we'll try as best we can to clarify that. I can't promise we'll get it exactly right.
Yeah, sorry if there's been sort of document merge related to numbering, but let me say this. I do believe that currently Exhibit 32.2 is what is supposed to be the MBE WBE narrative plan. If I'm wrong about that, just make sure that when you are uploading everything to IntelliGrants as part of your rental round submission, look for the line that's listed in IntelliGrants as something like MWBE narrative plan. It'll be listed something like that in IntelliGrants. That's where you want to upload the written plan with the completed form attached to the end of that. And I did see that some folks had asked about 32.3. I believe that is actually the Section 3 section. So the fillable form is not its own exhibit. It doesn't become exhibit 32.4 or 32.5 or something like that. The fillable form is simply just going to be attached at the end of your MBE WBE narrative plan and uploaded as one document to what I believe is 32.2 in the upload section of IntelliGrants. If folks have further questions, I'm happy to jump on a call and we can stare at IntelliGrants together, but I believe that that is the correct information.
Thank you, Will. And just as another reminder, in addition to doing that, please make sure that you are emailing the fillable form to Kate and to Rebecca at DHCD. That's really important. You know, we realize this is sort of a new piece to get used to, and we just want to make sure that everybody has kind of gotten the message and gets it in. So please, in addition to entering into IntelliGrants, email to Kate and Rebecca. We've put those emails in the chat just in case you don't have them. Thank you. And a question about where to find 32.3 and 32.5. I'm not sure what 32.5 is, but I think there is a link that was already added to the chat to get you to the new form. And if you can't use that link, you can also look at the draft QAP and it is attached therein.
Yeah, I saw that Maura asked that question. Maura, I can follow up with you afterwards. As Sarah said, I don't believe there is a 32.5. I was just sort of being flippant, but I can follow up with you about other forms you might be missing as part of IntelliGrants. I did want to go back to one of the other questions, which was that yes, we recognize that this checklist, although it's included in the new draft QAP, we are asking you to use it for your current rental round submissions, which is not the same with the rest of the information that's included in the draft QAP, but with this document, because it's so important, we're asking you to use this document from the draft QAP for your rental round submissions that are due in a week. I also saw that someone asked for a Word version, which I thought might get asked, and we can certainly circulate that because I realize that that's probably a lot easier to fill out than the PDF format. So we will be sure to email that to everyone who registered for today's session.
Sorry. Kate
Yes.
and Rebecca, we have a question about whether you would like the both the narrative and fillable form emailed to you, or just the fillable form emailed to you. Whoops.
You're muted, Kate.
Okay, sorry, delay, love Zoom. Please send us both the narrative and the fillable form, gang. Obviously, this is a first time through. There could be some glitches. The most important thing will be that you you made a good effort. You got something into IntelliGrants, hopefully with a lot of information. You backed that up by sending it also to Rebecca and me. We are logging it in as the one-stops come in so that we know who has submitted. Obviously, the applications are reviewed by different people. There's a whole team, including a lot of the folks from the public lenders who are on the call. So we're not going to go into each one stop right away to see if the MWBE checklist is there. Same with the green essay, which is why we're asking you to send it to us so that we know we have it and can start taking a quick look at it.
I see there's a question about confusion about how to number and upload the documents, which I apologize for. So when we send out the Word version of this, we will also include written instructions, sort of trying to better reiterate what we went through today so that you know exactly where to upload this as part of your one-stop submission. If anyone would like to ask a question verbally, you can raise your little digital hand by using the button at the bottom, and we will unmute you if you would like to ask a question verbally. Otherwise, I don't see any additional questions at the moment from anyone in the development community. Assuming none, again, I do want to say how much we value being able to get feedback from those who are actually having to fill this out. It's going to just make everyone's lives much easier in the future going forward with this form if we know kind of what hurdles you're encountering as you go through it. So again, wmorgan@cedac.org is where you can send any questions or feedback that you might have. And again, happy to answer those. I do see that we have one hand raised. So Pearl or Delia, if you could unmute Peter Graham, I think he wanted to ask a question. Peter, you're on.
Yes, a lot of good information. Thank you. And I know I'm not alone in having seen a wide diversity of forms submitted in a one-stop to showcase what is being done. The one question I had is if there is a preferred or recently updated version of a reporting form that CEDAC and DHCD feel is the best, latest, greatest reporting form for these things. I have often seen really old PDFs or old HUD forms. I haven't looked through my due diligence of what's available, but that would be a helpful thing to know what you want it reported in.
Rebecca or Kate, do you want to field the reporting question?
I think Looking at the forms is something that we are working on. I don't know that that's, ready imminently for you. We still have the older versions of the HUD reporting forms that we have to use for the HUD applicable programs to report. So I think that's something that's still, as I say, in process, but it's coming, and it will be, as we get that done, with input, with whatever is required from HUD, and then anything else that may be, meaningful to other partner lenders and such. We will be in touch, but it does need to be processed a bit more still.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter and Rebecca. Any other final questions from anyone in attendance?
Will,
Sure,
while
go
we're
ahead.
waiting to see if anyone else has a question, I just want to reiterate our thanks to DHCD for your commitment to this. And as I was running through the list of our sister quasi-public agencies, I inadvertently left out mass development, but of course they are a key partner in this as well. And as Will mentioned, we've also been doing a lot of work with MHIC on training opportunities. So please stay tuned, because we expect to be offering a training on strategies to increase MBE utilization coming up in the next couple months. So with that, have we gotten any other questions?
We have not.
Kate or Rebecca, any final words from you?
No, just again, thank you very much. This is so important. I'm really so grateful for all the work that you've done, and frankly, all the engagement from the development community in Massachusetts. It'll be exciting to read the narratives and the fillables that come in. So we're looking forward to that.
Thanks, Rebecca. And feel free to reach out to Will, as we've discussed, if other questions come up. We know we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a Word version of the form and some clarification on numbering and other pithy topics. So thank you everyone for participating. Will Morgan, special hats off to you for your great work on this. And to my other CEDAC colleagues, a big thanks. Thank you everyone for participating, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.